It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Now let's talk about what's the biggest planning opportunities with the Secure Act. Because now that I've given you what's going on, you're probably, well, how does this pertain to me? What do I do with this? So here's number one, is that tax location becomes even more important. Explain what tax location is.
Yeah, we always talk about, when you think about designing a portfolio, you want to look at your asset allocation, like how you spread your assets out across risk assets. Well, you also want to look at your asset location, meaning what types of investments do I house in what types of accounts? Well, now where it used to be okay to defer tax inside of a IRA or a 401k because it could grow for a long time for your life and also the life expectancy of your beneficiaries, you might not want as much of a growth component in those accounts now, since they have to be depleted as soon as 10 years after you expire. So you ought to really pay attention to what types of assets you're holding in your Roths, what types of assets you're holding in your after-tax, and then especially what types of assets you're holding in your pre-tax IRAs and 401ks.
Well, there's several things going on here. We've always known tax deferred, most assets that we put in tax deferred, we liked putting ordinary income producing assets like your bonds, things like that, because there was no tax benefit. Like Roth assets, you want to put your half-line growth investments in there because you want to minimize how much you'll pay in taxes on all that capital appreciation. Well, I think what this has done is this has put an exclamation point on the fact that your low and slow growing conservative assets, since this is going to be required to be taxable and it's going to be accelerated at ordinary income tax rates, pay attention to that. So you probably want to put your bonds and your conservative things that are generating that income component will probably want to be in this type of structure from now on.
And you even want to think about it in terms of how you're saving, how you're building your assets. If you had previously made the decision that I'm going to do the Roth side or the pre-tax side, you may want to start revisiting that. You may want to think about how I'm building each of those buckets up through my contributions. And
that leads to number two. Roth conversions. Now, look, this is a good thing, is that because we love people. If you retired at 60, forever we have said that period of time between retirement age, its date of 60, all the way through you reach 70 and a half, if your income dropped substantially and as a result your marginal tax rates went down substantially too, you've got to max out those lower tax rates by trying to turn that tax deferred money into tax-free money by doing Roth conversions. Well, now that they push this out to 72, you just picked up more time to do Roth conversions.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is not only did you pick up more time, it may even be more advantageous to do so now if passing on money, legacy building is something that matters. It was already better for beneficiaries to inherit Roths. Now it's even better for beneficiaries to inherit Roth.
Yeah, because a lot of the new legislation is going to create essentially a tax balloon, meaning that after 10 years, boom, this thing turns into a big tax bill. So pay attention to that. Number three. Beneficiary designations will definitely need to be reviewed. And the big part of this is because if you have a trust, it's not uncommon to list a trust, and that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just that you got to make sure that you're not creating a tax bomb like conduit trust might do. You pay attention to discretion. The trust, if your trust is treated like a trust from income tax purposes, not a flow through. You're probably going to want to pay attention because the tax rates are horrible under the new tax legislation on trusts. I mean, you're up into the 37% tax bracket as of $12,500.
It doesn't take a lot to get there. So one of the things that we think is probably prudent that makes a lot of sense to do is you just want to go review your estate documents, review the language that describes how beneficiaries should be named, and make sure that matches what's actually reflected on your IRAs, on your 401ks. If it's something you have a question about, reach out to the attorney who drafted the documents and say, hey, does this still, I don't know why I'm typing right here. Does this still make sense given the Secure Act changes?
And think of it, because I want to give illustration on this. 37% tax bracket is on income over, for single individuals, it's $518,000. For married filing jointly, it's $622,000. If it's a trust, it's $12,950, so right around $13,000. Pay attention to that. Beneficiary designations will matter. Number four, charitable contributions.
Yeah, this is one that was actually, it's really interesting because I think this was an unintended consequence that just kind of opened up. You know that we talk all the time about using qualified charitable distributions once you get to age 70. And a lot of times that made sense because the government made you start pulling out money at 70. Well, now that it's kicked back to 72, does it still make sense? Absolutely.
Well, and everybody who's been watching this legislation, because this has been around for a while. Matter of fact, I think it was the springtime. We were like, This thing's a done deal. It's got bipartisan support, and then it's just limped around and dragged around and never became a law until December 20th. But I would pay attention to the fact that QCDs, everybody was curious, is it going to stay 70.5? Is it going to go 72? They just stayed pat with 70.5. Even though now RMD is kicking at 72, they gave you a little extra time that you can now, if you're charitably minded, you can give a portion of your money, of your IRA assets or whatever, to your charity, and it will lower your income. That's a great thing on those RMDs. You don't get to take an itemized deduction on it, but that's okay because most people aren't taking itemized deductions anyway. This lets you lower your taxable income. And that leads to student loans, number 5. I think people, and this is all over the press, is about student loan debt. We know it's ballooning right now. It is built into this big balloon out there. A lot of students are carrying, a lot of it, this debt. This is allowing a $10,000 lifetime repayment per beneficiary and siblings. This definitely creates an opportunity to evaluate the coordination of 529 assets with tax credits, because that's the other thing is if you start taking too much 529 in your freshman and sophomore year, you kind of can minimize some of those tax credits that the government offers you. This, because they've added this $10,000 on student loan debt from the 529s, you might be able to coordinate that a little better. Let's go create some planning opportunities.